Good morning, everyone, to the exemplary leaders of the STO Camarines Sur, our ASDS, Madam Loida Nidea, to the ASDSS, Ma'am Kekil Ferro, Ma'am Lynn Padillo, Sir Lauro Miliano, to our CID Chief, Ma'am Mariben Berha, to our SDOD Chief, Sir Pedro Pilonio, EPSS, PSDSS, school heads, and to you, my dear teacher writers, good morning, everyone. My task today is to discuss with you the assessment of learning. So I am Rosemarie R. Miraña from Goa Science High School. I'll be discussing with you the assessment of students' learning. In the curriculum development, we have 3 questions which we are about and which we should answer. First is what to teach. Second is how to teach. And the third one is how to assess. The what to teach deals with the content standard, and the how to teach refers to the strategies on the pedagogical approaches, and the how to assess is the assessment of learning. The assessment of learning is the focus of our discussion for today. Today, we will revisit your previous learning on the assessment during your college days, your master's degree, vis-a-vis the DepEd Order number 08 series of 2015 and DepEd Order number 31 series of 2020, all about the assessment of learning. We will start first with the essential skills that a teacher should have. Teacher must possess these 3 essential skills. The first one is the planning skill, which include the preparation of our DLP, the weekly learning plan, or the quarterly learning plan. Basically, this should be rooted on our CG or the curriculum guide, the most essential learning competencies in this time of pandemic. In our preparation for our DLP, WLP, we have to consider the resources needed, the strategies to be employed, the time, and of course, the audience who are our students. The second skill of a teacher is about assessing. Writing of learning activity sheets, self-learning modules, or RBI scripts also require our planning skill on assessment. What is assessing? Assessing is a crucial skill. Assessment must consider the standards such as the content standard and the performance standard. Teacher must also ensure that the assessment is anchored with the competencies or the objectives. Teachers must also be familiar with the different types, forms of test, when to use, and how to use these forms of test based on the competencies or the objectives. Standards such as the content standards and the performance standards. But the most important consideration that we have to take into account is our student. Now, results of the assessment will give the teachers the feedback which are vital in the next planning cycle. This will provide feedback to the students and parents about their academic progress. And reporting of result must be done promptly and systematically. So these are the essential skills of the teacher: planning, assessing, and reporting. Let's define assessment based from the context of the DepEd Order number 08, series of 2015, DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, and the theoretical framework of assessment. First, assessment may be defined as any of the variety of procedures used to obtain information about the student performance. We will discuss these procedures in the succeeding slides of my presentation. The second definition of assessment is that it is a systematic, continuous process of monitoring the various pieces of learning to evaluate student achievement and instructional effectiveness. In our LAS and SLMs, the assessment must be developmental or spiraling in approach. It is continuous because we do not only assess for once. The LAS and the SLMs contain different tasks, and these different tasks must be arranged systematically. Like what I've said, this must be developmental or spiraling in presentation. The third definition of assessment answers the questions: how much a given skill does a student possess before, this refers to the diagnostic, during, this is the formative, and after instruction, or the summative, and how much change has occurred. So these are the three definitions of the assessment. We move on with the introduction to classroom assessment. The discussion on the classroom assessment on DepEd Order number 31 could be found on page 50. If you have your copy with you with the DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, please find the definition and discussion of the classroom assessment on page 50. On DepEd Order number 08, series of 2015 on classroom assessment, assessment is defined as a process that is used to track the learner's progress in relation to the learning standards and the development of the 21st century skills, to promote self-reflection and personal accountability among students about their own learning, and to provide basis for the profiling of student performance on the learning competencies and standards of the curriculum. Various kinds of assessment shall be used appropriately for different learners who come from diverse contexts. So the identification of the type and forms of assessment that we will be employing with our students will also depend on the diversity of our students, such as their cultural background and life experiences. Moreover, classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Okay? Moving on, teachers should employ classroom assessment methods that are consistent with curriculum standards. Dapat po, anchored yung ating assessment sa curriculum standard natin. It is also important for teachers to always inform learners about the objectives of the lesson so that the latter will aim to meet or even exceed the standards. In our SLMs, you were asked to unpack the MELCs. And you were asked to formulate 3 objectives with 1 cognitive, 1 affective, and 1 psychomotor. On the last, you will not unpack the MELC. State the MELC as it is. The teacher provides immediate feedback to students about their learning progress. Immediately after the conduct of the test and after checking the test papers of the students, the teacher must be responsible to promptly return the test papers to the students so that the students would know his or her or their progress. Classroom assessment also measures the achievement of competencies by the learners. Diba, pagka gumagawa tayo ng DLP, naka-state natin sa DLP natin, halimbawa, at the end of the lesson, the students or 85% of the students are able to. Then, you start enumerating your objectives. So, based from the result of the assessment, makikita natin kung naabot ba natin or ng ating mga mag-aaral yung target natin na 85%. Now, we move on with our classroom assessment. So, what are the purposes and functions of assessment? First, the classroom assessment will inform the teacher about students' progress. It is important that a teacher has a record of the academic performance progress of each student. Classroom assessment will also inform the students about their progress. And the classroom assessment will also provide information on the academic progress of the students to the parents and to the future teachers of that particular student. The result of the classroom assessment may also be provided to other stakeholders, provided the purpose is beneficial and will not violate any right of a particular student. Then, we move on to the scope of the classroom assessment. First, what are we going to assess? We will assess the cognitive behavior of the students. That's why we have our cognitive objective. And because we have our cognitive objective, we should also assess the cognitive behavior of the students. This will gauge the knowledge and information gained, intellectual and abilities. Second, we stated our affective objective, and therefore, we have to assess the learning of the students or the status of the students in terms of affective behavior. And these are the attitudes, interests, appreciation, and values of the students. And the third objective is psychomotor behavior. We provided psychomotor objective, and therefore we have to assess the extent of learning of the students in terms of psychomotor behaviors. What are these? These are the perceptual and motor skills and abilities in performing tasks. Okay, the classroom assessment may be classified into two general types. What are these two general types? We have the formative and the summative assessments. These formative and summative assessments may be also classified as traditional or authentic or alternative form of assessment. The formative assessment may be given using the traditional or the objective type of test, or this may be given using the authentic or the alternative form of assessment. Likewise with the summative assessment. In the succeeding slides of this discussion, we will discuss each type of the traditional and authentic assessments. Now, let's differentiate first formative and summative assessment. What's the difference between the two? Okay. In the DepEd Order number 08, series of 2020, this DepEd order explains that formative assessment, the results are recorded but not graded. This is very important. I'll repeat. Results of the formative assessment are recorded but not graded. The results of the day-to-day quizzes are recorded to have a ready result of the student academic progress. But this should not be part of the basis for giving grades to the students. How many days we have for each quarter? Example, we have 40 to 45 days. And for each day, we give our student one quiz per day. The result will be recorded for us to have a tracking of the progress of our students, but the result will not be graded. Likewise, in our SLMs, we have formative assessments in forms of the performance tasks. In LAS, we can have 1 to 3 performance tasks, and all of these tasks are formative in nature. Likewise, in our SLMs, we also have different tasks arranged spirally or developmentally. And all these performance tasks are considered to be formative in nature. And therefore, results of this should be recorded but should not be graded. Ano pala ang pagbabatayan ng ating mga guro sa pagbibigay ng grade para sa ating mga mag-aaral? Still, we have to refer to DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020 as basis on giving grades to our students. Formative assessment may be given at any time during the teaching and learning process. This may be a paper and pen activity or a performance task for our students. Formative assessment may be seen as assessment for learning. So teachers can make adjustments in their instruction. The result of the formative assessment will serve as our feedback. And therefore, from the feedback, we will reflect on that and adjust our strategies in the delivery, in the conduct of the teaching learning process. Diba? Kaya nga sa regional memorandum natin tungkol sa paggawa ng LAS, sabi doon, ang LAS daw will advantage the teacher dahil tayo mga teacher ang nakakaalam kung ano ang tunay na sitwasyon sa kasalukuyang sitwasyon natin. And therefore, dahil tayo ang nakakaalam ng kasalukuyang sitwasyon, ay maia-adjust natin ang ating mga activities depende sa kakayahan at sitwasyon ng ating mga mag-aaral. Okay? It is also assessment as learning, wherein students reflect on their own progress. And then, results of the test may be promptly returned to the students for them to be able to reflect on their performance. The teacher may also advise or devise a scheme for the students to take reflection. Formative assessment must also provide students with immediate feedback on how well they are learning throughout the teaching learning process. And formative assessment enables students to take responsibility of their own learning and identify areas where they do well and where they need help. Okay? So next, we come now to the summative assessment or summative test. What is a summative test? Okay? So, summative test may be seen as assessment of learning which occurs at the end of a particular unit, lesson, or chapter, unlike the formative assessment. Summative assessment measures whether learners have met the content and performance standards. And the results of the summative assessments are recorded. I'll repeat, the summative assessments results are recorded and used to report on the learner's achievement. Recorded and could be basis for giving grades to our students. So eto na po ngayon yung hinahanap nyong magiging batayan natin sa pagbibigay ng marka sa ating mga mag-aaral. And therefore, dahil hindi po natin pwedeng gamitin yung mga tasks natin, performance task natin na nakapaloob sa ating mga LAS at SLMs, ibig sabihin po, ang mga guro ay gagawa ng ibang summative assessment or summative test para sa ating mga mag-aaral. Iba sa kung ano ang matatagpuan na nakapaloob sa LAS at sa SLMs. Malinaw po tayo doon. So, DepEd Order number 31 is suggesting that there must be 4 written outputs and performance tasks that must be given to the students for each quarter. At yun po ang magiging nating batayan sa pagbibigay ng marka sa ating mga mag-aaral. At malinaw na hindi po yung mga tasks na matatagpuan natin sa LAS at sa SLMs. Primarily, the results of the summative assessment are reported to the learners and their parents or guardians. Okay? Ako po nung nagtuturo pa po ako, ang result or ang papel or ang summative test paper ng mga mag-aaral ay ibinabalik ko po sa kanila and I am requesting the parents to affix their signature on the result. For the parents to be informed of the performance of their student or child. Now, we come to the principles of high-quality assessment. Bakit kailangan po natin itong ikonsidera? Dahil po, ang quality or ang performance ng mga mag-aaral, ang achievement ng mga mag-aaral, ay malaki ang epekto ng kalidad ng assessment na ibinibigay natin sa kanila. Okay. Ano po ang unang principle to achieve high-quality assessment? First, it should be clear and appropriate learning targets. Saan po nating bahagi ito gagawin at ibabatay? Batay po ito sa pagkaka-formulate nyo ng inyong objectives. Second, appropriateness of assessment methods. Then, the validity, extent to which the test serves its purpose. Ano ba ang purpose natin sa pagbibigay natin ng formative assessment? Bakit po tayo nagbibigay niyan? Bakit tayo nagbibigay ng summative test? Okay? From the word form, hinuhubog pa lang natin yung ating mga mag-aaral. And therefore, wala pang mastery. Fairness, intent that each question should be made as clear as possible and free of bias. Yung mga questions natin should be fair. Then, positive consequences. Effect of assessment on the student's motivation and study habits. Mas papalalimin pa po natin ang discussion natin dito sa mga susunod na slides. And then, the assessment must be reliable. It must be consistent with which a student may be expected to perform on a given task. And the last one is practicality and efficiency. Ease and efficacy. Halimbawa, sa panahon natin ngayon, na wala sa harapan natin ang mga mag-aaral natin at tayo po ay gumagawa ng LAS at ng SLMs, paano ba magiging practical sa atin at sa ating mga mag-aaral ang mga tasks na ibibigay natin sa kanila? We will also consider the safety and security of the students along with the performance of the task given to them in the LAS and SLS. Okay, so these are the principles of high-quality assessment. Moving on with the unproductive uses of tests. Mayroon palang unproductive use of tests na okay po. Nagiging pong unproductive ang isang test kung halimbawa we are giving test to threaten Sinong tinithreaten natin? Of course, sinong tinitest natin? Ang ating mga mag-aaral. Halimbawa, during the conduct of the face-to-face classes, there are times na very eager, very enthusiastic si teacher in the delivery of the lesson. Pero there are also times na yung mga mag-aaral ay hindi natin mapakalma, masyadong maiingay, at wala sa focus ang kanilang pag-aaral in a particular time. Kaya si teacher minsan sasabihin, okay, get 1/4 sheet of paper. Do you think the result would be productive? Or, halimbawa, teacher ka sa first period. At during your period, palaging maraming huli pumasok sa klase. Kaya, you decided na during the start of the class, you will always give quiz or performance tasks para yung bata ay hindi na mahuli. Do you think nasa threatening ba siya? Ang sagot ay nasa atin pong mga kamay. Then we also have the unannounced testing. One day, I was listening to our house help who is also attending to her online class. The teacher said, I used to be giving unannounced test. Sabi ko, huh? Okay. So, unannounced testing is under unproductive uses of test. Bakit? We will discuss that later. And nagiging po siyang unproductive if the purpose is to ridicule someone. Next po, if it is used to track, and if it is used to label. So these are the unproductive uses of the tests. Now, para hindi maging unproductive ang ating test, we should follow the ethical testing practices. First, to be ethical, we have to inform the students in advance that they are about to take a test for them something about the nature of the test. So, hindi pwede ang unannounced. Because we have to inform the students in advance. Why? Unannounced test based from the study will create anxiety or will cause anxiety to our students. And if the student is having his or her anxiety while taking the test, do not expect that he or she will give you a good score. Mataas ba ang makukuha natin kung takot tayo habang nagtitake ng test? Mataas ba ang score na makukuha natin kung alam nating hindi tayo nakapaghanda? In the first place, ano ba talaga ang purpose natin? Ano ba talaga ang gusto natin? Pumasa ang ating mag-aaral o hindi? Of course, gusto nating pumasa ang ating mga mag-aaral. Second one is explain the mechanics of taking test. Paano ba sasagutan ang test? Paano ba isasagawa ang test? The students must be informed of this. That's why in our performance task, there must be a rubric. And the rubric must be agreed upon by the students and the teacher. Hindi lang si teacher ang nagde-decide sa rubric. Dapat kasali po ang mga students sa paggawa natin ng rubric. And that is one way of explaining the mechanics of the test. And then, motivate students to do as well as they can, as long as they are not threatened or made anxious about their performance. Minsan, yung motivation natin, akala natin na motivate natin yung mag-aaral. Yun pala, our words are causing anxiety to our students. Then, lalo na pag sa mga contest, ano po? Then, testing materials and results must be kept secured before, during, and after the testing. Why? Because this will affect the validity and reliability of the result of the test. Halimbawa, may absent kang mag-aaral. Summative test ngayon na nakaschedule. Absent siya dahil may sakit siya. The reason is valid. What will you do kapag ka pumasok na yung mag-aaral? Yun pa rin ba ang gagamitin nating test? Or gagawa tayo ng panibagong parallel sa test na ibinigay natin sa nakararami? Next is examine results to identify interventions if needed in planning activity. So, ito yung pinakamaganda. Yung result ng test ng mga mag-aaral natin ay magbibigay sa atin ng impormasyon kung ano ang gagawin natin sa susunod nating pagpaplano in the delivery of the teaching-learning process. So, these are the ethical testing practices. Una, we have to inform our students. So, unannounced test is a big no-no. And explain the mechanics of the test. And making and formulating the rubric, it must be agreed upon by the students and the teacher. Next one is the unethical testing practices. This must be related to the unproductive uses of the test. Okay, so unethical if the teacher tutors the students on the specific subject matter of an expected examination. Teacher ka pero tutor ka din ng isang estudyante or more. So that is an unethical testing practice. And then use or give test item from any part of the test in which only a word or phrase has been changed. Halimbawa, you gave one set of tests for the students during the summative test. And still, those questions were used during the periodical test. Please formulate test questions which are parallel but not exactly lifted from a particular test question. Then, to use any practice form that is similar to the actual test. Halimbawa, gusto nating mataas ang result ng ating mga mag-aaral sa periodical test natin. That's why we conducted a review. Pero yung review na ginamit yung materials na ginamit natin sa review, siya na rin gagamitin natin sa periodical test. So that is an ethical test practice. Now, we come now to this one. Two general types of the formative and summative assessment. Okay? These are the traditional and the alternative or authentic. The traditional or the objective type of test, the alternative or the authentic type of test. What are the objective type of test? I only included the most familiar types of tests under the objective type of test. First is we have the multiple choice test. Second is the binary type of test, or the true or false. Then matching type test, completion or short answer test, closed test, and the essay test. On the alternative or the authentic type of test, we have, of course, the performance tasks test. Under the performance tasks test, we have the process-based, the product-based, exhibitions, demonstrations, journals, and portfolio. So these are the different types of tests under the performance or the alternative and authentic. So we will discuss this one by one. We'll start with the discussion on the multiple choice type of test because this is the most familiar type of test. And in our LAS and in our SLMs, we use the multiple choice type of test in SLMs, we use the multiple choice type of test in our pre-test and post-test. Sa LAS natin, wala tayong ganitong type of test. Wala tayong objective type of test sa LAS natin. Ulitin ko po, ang pagkakaiba natin isa sa LAS at sa SLMs. Sa SLMs, mayroon tayong objective type of test para sa pre-test and sa post-test. Pero sa LAS po natin ay wala tayong objective type of test. Lahat ay performance tasks test. Okay? So, let's move on. What are the parts of the multiple choice test? Of course, these are familiar with you because we've learned this from our college days. So, the parts of the multiple choice test, first is the STEM. The STEM is the part of the item that presents the item as a problem to be solved or a question or a statement. Example, what is the result of human activities to the ozone layer? So that is the STEM. Okay. There are also three ways of presenting the STEM. The STEM may be a direct question, like what I have stated. It may be incomplete statement. If it is stated this way, all the questions or the last one ends with a period. And the mathematical equation. For elementary students, it is suggested that the questions must be given in a form of a direct question. Also, when I am conducting a quality assurance and editing and revision of SLMs, I always suggest to our writers that it's better to formulate questions STEM in complete sentence. Example of direct question. What is the result of human activities to the ozone layer? Okay, so we have A, B, C, and D. So this A, B, C, and D, these are called options. So sinadya ko po na ang D ay ang nakalagay none from the given choices because it has a bearing on the succeeding discussion of our topic. So yan po ang example ng direct question. Okay, how to develop a multiple choice type of test? First, the STEM should introduce what is expected of the examinee. If the question is asking for a name of a person, all options should be names of persons. Wala pong dapat ihalong iba para lang magkaroon tayo ng distractor. That would be a distraction of the test. If it is asking for a place, then it must all about a place. Next, there should be no repetition of words in the STEM and options. this is self-explanatory. Third one is avoid specific determiners. In AP, the longest the option, the highest is the chance that is the right answer. Di po ba? And also in other subjects. Okay? So if we can avoid that one, we must avoid po. Then number 4, use vocabulary suited to your students. So we use vocabulary for the students to be able to understand our test question and not to impress our students. Kung ang mga estudyante natin ay grade 4 pa lang, dapat yung vocabulary gagamitin natin ay yung akma sa kanilang kakayahan. Huwag po tayong gagamit ng mga kaipaluting words na hindi akma sa kakayahan ng ating mga mag-aaral. Again, we should go back to asking ourselves, ano ba ang gusto natin? Makapasa ang ating mga mag-aaral o hindi? Yan po palagi ang dati nating iisipin when constructing test questions. Okay? State the STEM and options positively whenever possible. Okay? But if we cannot avoid to be stating the question in a positive statement, be sure that the negative words that we use must be highlighted. Then avoid inclusion of distractors which are of use. Halimbawa, you have the options A, B, C, and D. Dahil wala tayong naisip na ibang option para sa letter D, nilagay natin ay none of the above or all of the above. Minsan, nagiging obvious na yung letter D ay ang tamang sagot. That's why when I am conducting quality assurance of IMs, especially the SLMs, I would always suggest that a writer must offer another option for the letter D. Pero kung ginamit niya po sa number 1 ay none of the above, dapat sa lahat ng items, none of the above ang letter D para hindi po maging obvious na yun ang tamang sagot. Okay? Then, avoid inclusion of tapos na yan. Then, vary the placement of the right option. Okay? So, iwasan po natin na magkaroon ng pattern ang tamang sagot dahil may mga mag-aaral tayong wise test takers. Example, para maging madali sa pag-check natin ng papel, 1 to 5 A, 6 to 10 B, 11 to 15 C. So, mayroon siyang pattern. Kaya kahit hindi na po basahin ng estudyante ang mga susunod na sagot, alam niya na kung ano ang sagot. So, kung maaari po ay iwasan natin yon. And then, there should only be one correct option. Okay, example, which of the branches of the government enacts laws? A, Congress, B, House of Senate, C, Executive Branch, D, House of Representatives. Yung A, B, at D, lahat ay may kaugnayan sa bawat isa. So, this would create confusion to our students. Okay? Dapat mayroon po tayong isang pinaka-tamang sagot. And then, the use of the none of the above and all of the above. So, yun na po yung sinabi ko. Kung sa number 1 pong item natin ay gumamit tayo ng none of the above or all of the above, lahat po ng items, ang letter D natin, ay yun na po ang ilalagay natin, none of the above and all of the above. Otherwise, this will give our students the hint that that must be the correct answer. Then avoid trivial information from the options. Example, who was the president of the Commonwealth? A, Manuel L. Quezon, B, Manuel R. Quezon, C, Manuel M. Quezon, or D, Manuel E. Quezon. This must be avoided. Next. Arrangement of options. Ito yung pinaka-paborito ko po. So, I always say to our writers that the result of the test is greatly affected by the physical presentation of the test or test questions. And because we can avoid this, so we must avoid this one. Example po, we can arrange the options aesthetically. One way of doing it is by arranging the options from the shortest to the longest. As in this example, A, Congress, B, House of Senate, C, Executive Branch, and D, House of Representatives. O, di ba? Mas maganda po siyang tingnan kaysa kung may mahaba, may maiksi, mahaba ulit, tapos maiksi ulit. Or, kung pare-pareho ang length ng options, you can arrange the options alphabetically. Kung pare-pareho ang length ng options. Or, you can arrange the options based on the magnitude of the options. Okay? So, ulitin ko po kasi laging ito ang inuulit ko talaga sa mga writers namin na we should present the test items aesthetically, meaning with art. Okay? Then for the number 12, the stem should be grammatically correct, should obey standard English rules of grammar and punctuations. There are words which could be spelled in other correctly spelled, like endorsement, I, or E, or other words. And it is suggested that we should follow the standard English rules of grammar and punctuations. And then the number 13, use 4 or 5 options. O, eto again po. If we started with 4 options, all throughout the items, we should have 4 options. If we started with 5 options, all throughout the items, we should have 5 options. Ano po? Kung alin yung nasimulan natin, yun na po ang ating ipagpapatuloy. Kung hanggang di lang, di hanggang di lang. Kung hanggang ika, hanggang ilahat. Ano po? Then avoid formulating question or questions which will provide answers to the succeeding questions. Example, you have your question for number 10 like this. When was Magellan killed in the Battle of Mactan? Of course, you should have your options. And in the number 20, where was the battle that killed Magellan happened? Number 10 question will give the answer for the number 20 item. Another, for number 2, it is an angle that has a measure of 90 degrees. For number 6 question, if angle ABC is a right angle, what is its measure? So the number 2 and the number 6, either of the two will give a clue to the students as to the right answer. So we must avoid questions like this po. Okay? So these are the tips on how to formulate multiple type of test. Okay? Next is the different types of multiple choice test. First is we have the stimulus material STEM options. So here is an example of the stimulus material STEM options in literature. The teacher gave a passage followed by questions. So this reading is the stimulus. Okay, these are the questions relative or related to the reading given by the teacher. So we call that stimulus response test. Okay, so the next type of test is the STEM options. This is also similar to correct options. So that's why my discussion on this is this one. Okay, example, what is the element of the state which refers to the definite place where the people reside? Okay, so this is the STEM and these are the options. And in this item, there's only one correct answer or correct option. The third type of the multiple choice test is the negative STEM. Okay, example, the following are the partners in Axis Alliance, except, okay, Italy, Japan, Germany, and Great Britain. Okay, when you are using the negative word, please do not forget to highlight the word. You may italize the word. You may write it in capital letters or highlight the word. Okay, so this is the negative STEM. Next one is, the fourth one is the contained options or familiar in identifying errors. Okay, so identify the error in this sentence. The president, together with his advisor, decide on the COVID-19 vaccine to be procured. So identify what is not or what is an error to this statement. So we call that contained options. Okay, so the next type of the objective type of test is the binary type of test. When we say binary, that means two. Okay, so there are only two options, like of the true or false, agree or disagree, yes or no, fact or opinion, or the cause and effect. So this is the binary type of test. Okay, how do we formulate binary type of test? Okay, so these are the pointers on the preparation of the binary type of test. First, ensure that half of the items should be true and half should be false. Example, when you have 10-item binary type of test, meaning 5 of that total items must be answered by true and half by false. Then avoid qualitative and quantitative terms such as best, some, many, few, several, and others, and determiners such as always, all, and never. Whenever you are or we are constructing a binary type of test. Then avoid using trick questions. This is self-explanatory. Limit the statement to the point that it is being tested. Okay, do not give questions which are not included in your objectives. Then avoid excessive use of negative words. Which are not, which do not, which does not. Okay, that must be limited or avoided. Then, there are also types of the true or false test. Number one is the simple true or false. Write true if the statement is true and false if otherwise. Example, President Rodrigo Duterte is the 16th president of the Philippines. True or false? Okay. The number two, modified true or false. Write true if the statement is correct and false if otherwise. If false, underline the word or phrase that makes it false. Example, Rodrigo Duterte is the 16th president of the Philippines. If this is not true, then the student will underline the word or the phrase that makes it false. Then the number three, true or false with correction. Write true if the statement is correct and false if otherwise. If the statement is false, rewrite it to make it right. This one, number four, cluster true or false. The following speak about the value of counseling. One, counselors value and inspire clients. True or false. So this is the cluster true or false. Then, true or false with options. Example, A, if only the first statement is true. B, if only the second statement is true. C, if both statements are true. And D, if both are false. So, yan. That is true or false with options. And we come to the third type of the multiple choice, third type of the objective type of test, the matching type test. Okay? So, here are the pointers on writing simple matching type test. Ano po? As much as possible, there must be 3 columns. Okay? So, this is the modification that I made po. The first column is for the longer items. As you could see, this is column A. The longer items, the second column for the shorter options, and the third column is for the answer. Bakit po minodify ko na nandito sa third column, sa C ang blanks for the right answer? Di ba po, pag tayo ay nagbabasa, lagi tayong nagsisimula sa left side. So, magbabasa tayo, landform that looks like a table with the sides A, island, mountain, plateau, valley, volcano. And therefore, diretso na yung bata dito sa number 1. Hindi na siya babalik ulit doon ng kanyang mata. Kaya, we have C provided for the right answer. Okay? Next one. Use homogeneous items and options. Halimbawa, ito po. Yung items natin, ano po yung nanonotice ninyo? These are all about land formations. Ano po? And the answers that could be found in column B are also about land formations. So do not give water formations if your focus is land formation. Again, this will depend on your objective. Okay? There must be more options than the items to avoid the tendency of guessing. Next, a 5 to 10 item is ideal for this type of test, for the matching type of test. Arrange the options alphabetically kung the same ang kanyang length, numerically, or depending on the magnitude of the options. Next one, state the directions clearly, including the introduction on what is each column for or about. What is column A all about? What is column B all about? What is column C all about? Explain also whether options can be used only once or more. There are options that could be used more than once. Okay? And that is another type of matching type test. Then number 6, the items and options should be contained in the same page. Example, you have 5 item matching type test. Okay? The first 5 questions is on this particular page, first page. The second half or the 6 to 10 questions could be found on the next page. Okay? Mahirap po yun sa ating mga mag-aaral. That would be consuming much effort and time on the part of our students. Now, we have the types of matching type test. First is the perfect matching type. Okay? So, kailan pwede nating sabihin perfect ang matching type test natin? When an option is the only answer to a particular item in column A. Okay? Example. Number 1, landform that looks like a table with steep sides. Anong tamang sagot po natin dyan? Okay? Isa lang ang tamang sagot dyan. Ano po? So, we also have the imperfect matching type. when an option is an answer to more than one answer. So that is imperfect matching. Sorry for the spelling. That is matching. Okay, so the fourth type of the objective type of test is the completion or short answer test. This format of testing requires the students to complete a sentence with the correct word or phrase. Okay, pointers for writing completion type of test. First is write items that clearly imply the type of response desired. Example, okay, you have to clearly state if you are expecting for the date or a date, a place, event, or name of a person. Sunod, only one blank per item. So, huwag yung isang question, dalawa yung blanks natin, no, na nakapalaob doon. Isa lang po. At saan natin ilalagay yung blank na yon? If possible, sa hulihan po. If possible, put the blank at the end of the sentence. Avoid using statements directly lifted from the books or any reference. Okay? Yan po ay sa completion type of test. Avoid specific determiners. And a direct question is generally preferred than an incomplete sentence. Okay? Statement should elicit answer. And blank for all items should be equal in length. Example, type of completion test, identification. So, it refers to the branch of the government that has the power to veto the law. So, saan natin ilalagay ang blank? Sa hulihan po. Why? Just the same, ang bata ay magsisimulang magbasa sa left side, papunta sa hulihan. Okay? Why completion type of test? Because we did not provide options. Okay? So, lahat po ay nasa hulihan, meaning nasa right side ang lahat ng blanks. Then, enumeration. List down the elements of the state. So, there are 4 elements. The state has 4 elements. So, therefore, we must provide 4 blanks in equal length. Next one is the filling the blanks. Okay, this is the preamble of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Okay, this is how, this is the feature of the filling the blanks. Then we have the analogy. Example, doctor is to the patient, as teacher is to what? Okay, so there are different types of analogy. Okay, which I know you know that. Then we also have the closed test. Today, my mother went to the blank to attend a mass. After the mass, the rain was very hard, but she forgot her blank. She was wet on the way, blank. So this is closed test. Okay, so those are the different types of the objective type of test. Okay, ito po yung sample test question which I gave to my college students before, okay, in sociocultural anthropology. So, if you adopted different types of tests in one testing activity, example, para sa midterm mo or periodical test mo, you will be using multiple choice type of test, you'll be using binary type of test, you'll be using matching type of test. You can use that po, provided you have to group all together according to their type. Kung halimbawa, ang multiple choice test mo is 1 to 20, lahat po yun ay multiple choice. Wala dyan na binary type of test. Sa pag nagko-QA po ako, pagka may nadadaanan po akong ganon, inaayos ko na po na dapat walang halo. Kung multiple choice test, lahat multiple choice test. Kung gusto mong magbigay na true or false, lahat true or false type of test. Ano po? Pero as much as I know, mas ini-encourage tayo sa ating SLM na ang ating pre-test at post-test should be an objective type of test and as much as possible, a multiple choice test. Okay? So look at the presentation of the STEM. These are all incomplete sentence. And the options are arranged, all arranged from the shortest to the longest. And if you started with arranging your options in this way, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, lahat po yan, kung may 10-item test ka, lahat po yan ay ganun yung arrangement natin. Pero I understand naman kasi gusto nating makatipid sa ating resources. Halimbawa po dito, A, B, pwede ring ang C at D ay dito. Ano po? Pero kung mas gusto natin na mas maging maganda yung ating test item, na po, ganito po yung arrangement natin. Okay? Sunod. O yan, 10 hanggang 19. So, lahat po yan incomplete sentence. Ang paka-formulate ng test questions at lahat ng arrangement ay from the shortest to the longest. As I've said, if you only have shorter options or short options, you may arrange the options alphabetically. Okay, yan na po. Ano po? So that is for the multiple choice type of test. Now, the second group is for the binary type of test. This is from 21 to 35. Lahat po yan ay binary type of test. Wala po siyang halo. Likewise, in the multiple choice type of test, wala ding halong ibang type of test doon. So, the third one is completion test. So, ito naman po ay lahat completion test. And then, matching type test, please notice that this is 10-item test. Lahat po siya ay nasa isang page lamang. So, ito po yung sinasabi kong nasa isang page lamang po siya. Yan. So, the column A for the statement, for the items, for column B, the options, and C for the answer. Okay? Let's go back. Okay? So, kung makikita nyo po, meron ditong good luck. Ano? Dahil gusto nating we want to motivate our students. Pero, huwag tayong maglalagay ng good luck na kung saan-saan lamang po. Di ba? Pag nagsasabi tayo ng good luck sa isang tao, ginagawa po natin to bago pa mangyari ang isang bagay. And therefore, kung ginugood luck natin yung student natin, dapat nasa unahan bago siya magsagot ng mga questions. So, it is not proper na ilalagay natin yung good luck at the end of the test. Ano po? For obvious reason. Tapos na siyang maghirap, saka pa lang natin siya sasabihan ng good luck. No? So, yan. Ulitin ko, sa unahan po ang good luck. You may also write some words at the end. Pero wag na pong good luck. Na po. Okay? So, that is for the first classification of the summative or formative, that is traditional type of test. By the way, going back here, ako I would always advise, and I always do it na, yung sagot, kung hindi naman, kasi dito ang instruction ko ay bilugan, kasi binibigay ko na sa mga mag-aaral ko noon ang test question. Pero kung nagtitipid tayo, at gagamitin pa natin yung isang set sa ibang sections, huwag nating lagay dyan na encircle. So be clear with the instruction. Kung ito na po ang ipapagamit natin sa mga mag-aaral, kung hindi encircle ang inyong sasabihin, write the letter of the correct answer on the blanks provided. So ang blanks po natin yan, 1, dito po yung blanks natin sa right side. Again, nagsisimula tayong nagbabasa, sa left, nagtatapos tayo sa right, and therefore, yung answer natin ay nasa right. Ginagawa natin nasa lahat ng blanks ay nandito para maging madali sa atin ang pag-check ng papel. Pero, sana po ay nandito sa right. Kasi that is in conformity with the physiological characteristic and capacity of a human individual. Okay? So next type is the alternative type of test or the performance tasks. Okay, so in DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, which is the guidelines that we are following in this time of pandemic. I hope every one of you has the copy of the DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020. If you have with you the copy of this DepEd order, you may browse while we are discussing the performance task. Okay. So, this performance task, ito yung ginagamit nating assessment sa ating LAS. Wala tayong traditional type of test sa LAS. At sa ating SLMs, marami tayong nilalagay na performance task. Okay? That's why we should be very familiar with this. Kung mayroon na po kayong kopya ng DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, malaking bagay, malaking tulong po ito sa inyo kasi hindi na kayo mahihirapan mag-isip kung anong performance task ang ibibigay nyo sa mga bata. Depende sa inyong objective dahil po ito ay nakapaloob na sa Annex B ng ating DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020. Pipiliin nyo na lamang po kung ano ang angkop sa inyong lesson at sa inyong objective. Okay? So, here, DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020 defines performance task as the assessment tasks that allow learners to show what they can know and are able to do in diverse ways. No? So, that's why in our performance task, we will be expecting varied answers or responses from our students. They may create or innovate products or do performance-based tasks, including skill demonstrations, group presentations, oral work, multimedia presentation, and research projects. All these things are examples of performance tasks, and this can be found on our DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020. Kaya please, to our writers, be familiar with our DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020 para hindi na po kayo mahirapan mag-isip kung anong task ang ibibigay nyo sa particular objective. Okay? So Annex B provides a list of the summative assessment tool which include the performance-based task. No? Annex B. I think that is page 14 of the DepEd order. Okay, so these are the performance tasks forms. Okay, a performance task may be process-oriented assessments which gives emphasis to the process in doing the task. Okay, example, during our face-to-face teaching learning process in science, you have your experimental conduct of science experiment. Okay, the procedures on how a student conducts the particular activity can be qualified under process-oriented performance task. And then product-oriented gives emphasis to the product or overall learning outcome. Example, when you are asking your students to create collage, the output there, the product there is the collage. How the collage was made is the process. Okay? Journal, ongoing record of events, experiences, and reflections on a given topic. Okay? Sa science experiment, sa research, sa research, ang mga bata ay dapat mayroong logbook o record book kung saan nakalagay ang journal ng progress ng activities nila sa kanilang research. Chine-check po yun ng teacher yung journal na yon. And then portfolio. It is a systematic and organized collection of selected students' outputs over a specified period of time. Halimbawa, you ask your students to prepare his or her portfolio for the first quarter, second, third, or fourth, for the first semester or second semester. Then project, long term, where the students are given a real life task and a real world rules in real world setting, usually investigatory project or experimental research. O, sa amin, sa Science High School, yung mga mag-aaral namin mula sa grade 7, because they have their research subject, they have this project. Okay? So, sa simula pa lang ng school year, magsisimula na yung lecture nila sa research, magsisimula na rin yung mga bata sa kanilang paggawa ng project in progress. Okay. In our case, marami akong nadadaanan sa mga performance tasks natin sa SLMs tungkol sa project, but this is not a long-term project. Maybe a week-long project ang napapagawa natin sa mga bata. Okay? But please be very careful in giving the performance task to our students, especially during this time of pandemic. So please always include that in your weekly home learning plan. Okay? So the guidelines on how the students will prepare the tasks. Also in your direction to your performance task. Okay? So we have the process of designing performance tasks. How do we design our performance tasks? If you were already a teacher during the secondary education curriculum using the UBD or the understanding by design, we use these graphs. This is very helpful in designing a performance task, okay? In which the G stands for the goal. So in designing your performance task, first you have to identify what's the goal of that performance. Of course, this should be anchored with our objectives. Okay? Okay. Again, you have to formulate your objectives following this sequence or order. You have to prepare the objectives from the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Why? What's the rationale behind? Okay? Kapag ka mayroon nang natutunan, mayroon nang naipasok sa utak ng mga bata at na-mold mo na yung kanyang affective domain, yung bata ay handa na para gamitin yon sa kanyang performance tasks. Okay? Then what's the R for the grasp? That is the role. Define the role or task of the student or group or states the problem or challenge to be resolved. What's the role of the student in that particular task that you are giving them? Then, audience explains who students are in the scenario and what they are being asked to do, who the students are solving the problem, and who they need to convince of the validity and success of their solution for the problem. Halimbawa, sa research, halimbawa sa research, malinaw yan kung para kanino yung ginagawa nilang research. Who are the beneficiaries of that? Then situation S. Create the scenario or explain the context of the situation. Karaniwan ito dun sa mga tawag dito sa kung may face-to-face tayo sa role-playing. Then product, performance, and purpose. Paint a clear picture what and why of the product, creation, or the performance. What is the performance challenge? So that is product, performance, and purpose. Then S for the standards and criteria for success. O nandito na ngayon yung rubric natin. Paano ba bibigyan ng marka yung mga bata batay sa kanilang nagawa? So, napakaganda po ng graphs na ito at pwede nyong makita. Sa internet natin, marami ding discussion tungkol sa graphs na makakatulong sa inyo para mas ma-enhance natin yung mga suggested activities na makikita natin sa Annex B ng DepEd Order number 31, Series of 2020. Please have a copy of that. I'll repeat po. Okay? Now, okay? So we have the rubric. The rubric is an assessment tool. Okay? Ano yung i-assess niya? Yung performance task na ibinigay natin. Ano ang gagamitin natin to assess the performance? We will have to use the rubric as the assessment tool. Okay, there are two different types of rubric. First is the holistic and the analytic. Okay, so what is holistic? Gives the overall traits of the performance, assigns a level of performance as a whole, kaya nga holistic. Then analytic describes the quality of the performance in each criterion, articulates levels of performance for each criterion. Ito yung medyo challenging sa atin pagdating sa performance task na ginagawa natin, yung pag-craft natin ng rubric. Okay. Okay. Let's have an example of the analytic rubric for a poem recitation. Okay, for the rubric for poem recitation, we have column 1 for the criteria, then column 2 to 4 for the points. So for the criteria for the poem recitation, first we have the number of appropriate hand gesture, second for appropriate facial expression, third is for the voice inflection, fourth is incorporate proper ambience through feelings in the voice. So first we have 5 points. What are the conditions or the indicators that a student should meet in order for him or her to get 5 points in this particular criterion? Okay, to get 5 points for criterion number 1, a student must demonstrate 10 or more appropriate hand gestures. To get 4, a student must demonstrate 5 to 9 hand gestures. And for 3 points, 4 or less appropriate hand gestures. For the second criterion, appropriate facial expression. To get 5 points, 10 or more appropriate facial expressions must be shown by a student. For 5 to 9 appropriate facial expressions, or 3 points for 4 or less appropriate facial expressions. And for the voice inflection, 10 or more appropriate voice inflection, a student will get 5 points. For 5 to 9, a student will get 4 points. For 4 or less, 3 points. Incorporate proper ambience through feelings in the voice. If the student was able to demonstrate 10 or more appropriate expression of feelings, a student will get 5 points. And 5 to 9 appropriate expressions, a student will get 4 points. And 3 points for 4 or less appropriate expression of feelings. So that's for the analytic rubric. Let's take a look at the holistic rubric for the same performance tasks. Okay, so holistic rubric for poem recitation again. Okay, so excellent speaker will get 3 points. But what are the conditions or indicators of excellent speaker? First, included 10 to 12 changes in hand gestures. 0 apparent inappropriate hand gesture. 0 violation on proper voice inflection. And 0 inappropriate expressions of feelings. So that is 3 points, excellent speaker. Good speaker will receive 2 points, provided a student must be able to display the following indicators. Included 5 to 9 changes in hand gestures. 1 to 2 inappropriate facial expressions. 1 to 2 voice inappropriate voice inflection. And 1 to 2 inappropriate expressions of feelings. 1 point for a developing speaker. So I use the word developing instead of poor speaker because that indicates negative connotation. So as I've said, we must use encouraging words in our indicators or criteria. Developing speaker will get 1 point if there are 1 to 4 included changes in hand gestures, 3 or more inappropriate facial expressions, and monotone voice, 3 or more inappropriate expression of feelings. Okay, so this is the holistic rubric for poem recitation. So I hope you are now guided on how to develop or craft your rubric for different performance tasks that are included in our LAS or SLMs. Okay, so for your guide, please use Annex B of DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, which provides sample of summative assessment tools that qualify as performance tasks in various learning delivery modalities. Again, please have a copy of DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020 as our guide in the assessment of the students' learning in this time of pandemic. Okay, references for this discussion are here displayed. That's all for my discussion for the assessment of students' learning. Thank you very much, and I wish good luck to our writers for Bicol culture and other learning areas for LAS, SLMs, and other IMs. Again, thank you very much and good luck.